very exciting meeting on Saturday night, Graham. Time to review it, and there's a few talking points out of the meeting. We start with race number 1. It was won by our Leo.
Yeah, it was a busy finish, Greg. Basically, we did report there were 3 horses held up in the race. Laura Megan didn't get clear till about the 100 metre mark, and we also had Diva's Delight and Batterwitz coming from back in the field that weren't fully tested.
Okay, so that's about it out of the first event. Now, what about race number 2? This was won by I've Got a Life.
Yes, probably fortunate to win. The starter had given Jack Trainer some instructions as the horse galloped coming out of the circle, and in the end I've Got a Life impeded the runner to his inside, Better Adam, and that being the case, the starter then declared a false start. Taking evidence from the starter, evidence from Mr Adams, one of the stewards who was adjacent to the incident, Jack Trainer was fined the sum of $300, charged with an offence of trying to gain an advantage, and was fined the sum of $300.
Okay. Anything else major out of that race?
Not really. I've Got a Life, I guess, from where it came in the field in the race itself, it looked to have a bit of a task, I guess, at the 500 metre mark, and in the end won convincingly. It probably was well graded with the claiming driver.
Okay. Race number 3. Now, there's a little bit out of this one. It was won by Start Dreaming.
Yes, well, I think it was a very good drive, Greg, from Blake Fitzpatrick to start with. He basically controlled the race from where he ended up. Look, there was an incident at the top of the straight where firstly Mr Fitzpatrick was able to hold Mrs Grives on Amaretto in a pocket, and shortly after entering the straight, Blake Fitzpatrick then proceeded to go for home, so as to speak. Miss Grives, in her mind, felt her best opportunity was to come to the outside of Mr Fitzpatrick. Mr Fitzpatrick's horse does shift up the track a couple of horses, and eventually Miss Grives alters course and takes the run to the inside of Blake Fitzpatrick. We did question Miss Grives about her commitment to continue to push to the outside of the winner, and secondly her, if you like, her the timing in which she attempted the run that became available to the inside. In looking at all the matters and the circumstances of the race, we elected it in the circumstances. Although we felt that she might have attempted that run 1 or 2 strides earlier, we didn't feel that her drive in the circumstances was culpable. You've got to remember in those circumstances that in adjudicating on a driver's effort, the stewards can't impose hindsight, that you've got to put yourself in the real time situation as best you can. There'll be some people that agree with us, Greg, and some not.
Okay. Well, what about race number 4? There's plenty of talk about this race after Saturday night. Better Draw won the race. Yaya's Hotspot was in behind the leader for most of the trip. Yes,
well, obviously the stewards were drawn to the fact that Miss Penella didn't appear to attempt to improve on straightening. She was on the back of the leader, Better Draw, I think it was, and there appeared to be certainly an opportunity, and some drivers, I've got no doubt, would have attempted to come off the back of Better Draw and proceed in the straight. In saying that, I was conscious that Chris Geary on Blue Pointer was trying to keep his horse's legs outside the wheels of Miss Penella. Thereafter, halfway down the straight, Miss Penella had a more difficult situation in the steward's mind, where firstly Chris Geary, then Robert Morris, and then the rest of the field started to make their runs, and perhaps she didn't quite have the same opportunity to shift ground and to obtain a clear passage. But in the steward's mind, in that sense, that the first opportunity she got is firstly Blue Pointer and then Robert Morris's horse dropped off, she proceeded to take the run. In looking at the first instance, we were particularly drawn to the 600 metre vision, and that indicated to us that Chris Geary was more forward than he appeared on the lateral vision. It was when you watch the race, the sky vision. And that being the case, we thought that the argument and the circumstances put forward by Miss Penella had greater merit than we initially thought, and as a consequence there was no action taken. Again, there'll be people who have difficulty with that decision. I would like to think that they've objective enough to consider their concerns in light of the 600 metre vision, which I think you're going to show.
Yeah, we have got that, and I think You're right. On the lateral, it looks as though Chris Geary is further back than he actually is off the 600-metre footage.
Yeah, I think if you try and establish where Chris Geary's feet are going relative to Lauren Pinella's wheel, it looks as though he's holding on by his toes, for want of a better description. If you allow for the camera angle and the vision from the back would indicate that he's more forward than what it appears.
Okay. What about...
If I could just say there, Greg, I think if I could make two comments. The stewards, as far as Miss Pinella is concerned, probably are on a hiding to nothing. If we go back to November, when she missed out on some drives in the Inter-Dominion, there was a great deal of my email box got bombarded with some quite derogatory comment and opinions that as to her standard of driving. What Miss Pinella did say to us in the initial instance, that she is aware of the racing manners of Yaya's hotspot, and if you go back and have a look at a race in the I think it was a heat of the New South Wales Derby about 2 years ago, the same horse she sought to undertake a similar manoeuvre, and in her mind she was conscious that when doing so on that occasion the horse went further than she would have required. And that was also in the back of her mind in this instance, having had a look at the New South Wales Derby incident. You know, to some extent, I think there's also merit in her thoughts in that case. So look, we did have a look at the incident quite thoroughly, investigated all angles that we had available to us, and in the end, the back camera basically confirmed Miss Pinella's explanation.
Okay. Anything else out of that race?
No, not really.
Okay. Race number 5. This was the Pink Diamond taken out by Our Dream About Me.
Yeah, look, a pretty dominant performance, I suppose, and a horse that was driven as though it was the best horse in the race, and that's how it turned out.
Race number 6. We've got a fair bit to talk about here. Eric Clapton and Our Waikiki Beach went head and head for a long time. Yeah,
well, I guess if you go back and have a look at Eric Clapton's performance, he's had 2 wins to his name about 5 starts ago, 2 wins in succession in the provincials in Victoria. He was having his second start for Blake Fitzpatrick and second start in New South Wales this time around, and Blake Fitzpatrick explained to us that he wasn't daunted by the concept of taking on Our Waikiki Beach, that he'd previously led on a horse ahead of Our Waikiki Beach. And his instructions, or his explanation, was that the horse had been sent to him because it's got a respiratory issue, and the connections felt it was best suited at Menangle at this stage of its career, and essentially that with the nature of the ailment it's got, the horse is best when allowed to run along, not overdo it, but allowed to run along, and Mr. Fitzpatrick put to us that was his instructions, and that was the intention in future. The horse would be driven in that manner every time the circumstances permit. Certainly that's a matter that we'll continue to review, but in the circumstances we noted that explanation. I think in credit to Eric Clapton, he was still probably had the gauge on empty, but he was still battling away at the 100 metres and did run 4th in the race. We did take a sample of Eric Clapton. We did note, the stewards noted, that the horse is also quite a big horse, and he was racing in a gig that Mr. Fitzpatrick, I think, is the longest gig that Mr. Fitzpatrick's got. So that's also a concern that maybe from time to time may hit the wheel.
All right. What about race number 7? This was the Paul Fitzpatrick free-for-all, and well, this one was taken out by Easy on the Eye.
Yeah, look, it was a great race, great finish, very busy finish. We did have a look at an incident down around the 100 metres where Modern Ruler, driven by James Rattray, was inconvenienced or checked and broke when tightened between I and Mr. Brightside, which had shown a tendency to lay in the straight or hang in the straight. And the eventual winner, I of this Easy on the Eye, driven by Natalie Rasmussen, which had commenced to improve inside Mr. Rattray's horse, and after eventually trying to ease him out, there was, in our view, there was a contribution by I and Mr. Brightside on the outside in hanging in, and that probably allowed Natalie Rasmussen to receive a reprimand rather than been given a charge.
Okay. What about race number 8 on Thunder Road? He was back to his bad manners after doing something similar in Victoria.
Well, it's unusual that you see two fancies and another horse that probably had prospects in on Thunder Road and Idle Bones basically blow the start. Mr. Hancock did say to us that on Thunder Road had paced and then took a while to get into his gate at Melton at his most recent start. He considered the same thing again. He thinks the horse is telling him he needs a freshen up. He's going to give the horse a freshen up, and we've instructed him to trial before we see the horse again.
Okay. And what about race number 9?
Look, probably just a change of tactics from Mr. Elchin on Floyd Mayweather. He elected to go back, and his explanation was that in hindsight he didn't think the horse appreciated being driven forward at its previous start, and he was disappointed with the run and simply was looking to turn that around, and of course he did so. Yeah.
All right, so a busy night for the stewards on Saturday.
Yes, it was, Greg, yes. Yeah.
All right, well, enjoy the carnival coming up over the next few weeks.
Thanks, Greg.